Well, no offense, Pierre. I love doing these hits with you, but for goodness sakes, let's drop the puck on the Stanley Cup Final, man. This week-long break, but there's lots of storylines to carry us through, and they continue today, the morning of game number 1 here. You know, it's interesting, Pierre, because you've got the Florida Panthers. So many of them were in the final last year and lost, and they felt that sting and how painful as a group that was. That's their motivation. A lot of these Oilers players, except 5 of them, have never been here before. So it's kind of that interesting dynamic of guys who felt that sting as a group versus guys that are just trying to get there together on their first crack at it.
Yeah, and no better voice than Corey Perry to walk around the room and say, guys, I've been here a bunch here lately, and come up empty-handed and talk about what that feels like. Matthias Ekholm as well with the Predators in 2017. He talked about that again this morning here. And it's important to talk about those I think about those memories, because you don't know how many chances you're going to get as a player to come back to a Stanley Cup Final. It's a 32-team league. Yeah. And a lot of players I've talked to over the years, and you heard Ekholm kind of say this today, but they've talked about how they have regrets of how, you know, they kind of let it slide, the opportunity. And so I think it's interesting to have those guys in the Oilers' room to get this group ready.
Did a one-on-one with Corey Perry, by the way. Should be available on tsn.ca. Had a few interesting comments. He's one of those guys that talks to a lot of the younger guys in the room, and his message has been, just play hockey. Just play hockey. You know, it's the same, play hockey. But at the same time, it's a Stanley Cup Final, Pierre, and I think we see it year after year. The intensity goes up, the speed goes up. It's going to be interesting to see how some of these younger Oilers handle it for the first time on this stage.
Yeah, and I think the key is you're not going to have a game go 100% your way normally in a Stanley Cup Final. You know, I call it sort of survival hockey. There's stretches in a game where you just got to get through those moments. I remember Matthias Ekholm before the playoffs even started in Edmonton after practice on the eve of Game 1 against the LA Kings, and he talked about the need for this Oilers team to learn how to win some ugly games to have a deep playoff run. And I think he proved to be prophetic. I mean, in fact, there was one in the LA series, that 1-0 win. But what better example than Game 6 to close out the Dallas Stars, outshot 34-10.
They were hanging on way too much. That was too much of a defensive shell almost.
Yeah, but his point is you're just not going to be able to have, you know, the high-octane games that you love to play as an Oilers team. Yep. And there'll be moments in this series where the Panthers' forecheck is overwhelming and the Oilers just have to hang on. But in those moments, can the Oilers find that composure to know that the next 5 shifts could be the difference between winning and losing as long as you just hang on, and then you get to a better moment in the game where you can apply your own pressure.
Interesting, you know, Chris Knobloch, one of the ones going through this for the first time, I thought it was interesting that he talked about making some calls and gathering some intel. He was asked about whether he called, the Rangers and got some intel. He said, I called around the league a little bit. I thought it was interesting, Pierre, like how common is that practice? And I guess it's all within bounds. It's not offside at all. Like if you know someone in the game and they just finished a series against the team you're playing, if you can get them to open up their books for you, I guess that makes sense.
It happens a lot. The coaching fraternity is super tight, and they share a lot within each other. And for Knobloch, it's a natural to reach out to the Rangers, where he started the year as their AHL head coach and had been there a couple of years. So he basically confirmed he did do that. But, of course, on the other side, Paul Maurice is best friends with Pete DeBoer, as we know. Yeah. Those two guys go way back.
A few FaceTimes maybe in the last week.
I can guarantee you that Paul Maurice and Pete DeBoer were exchanging and ideas leading into the Stanley Cup Final, and it's all kosher. It's what coaches do for each other in this fraternity, and they had all week to do it, by the way.
How many F-bombs do you think happened on those phone calls between those two?
Well, probably Pete DeBoer saying, still can't believe we lost that series. Yeah,
fair enough. So, with Stuart Skinner and Sergei Bobrovsky, we've got an interesting matchup in net here, Pierre. I called Stuart Skinner's performance in Game 6 against Dallas reputation cleansing, because I think there were still some doubts about him as late as deep into that Dallas series. Watching him on this stage, like Ken Holland and company at the trade deadline, they didn't go get another goalie. They decided, they didn't really have the assets or the cap space. They made the call right then and there that we're going to live or die with Stuart Skinner in net, and he's got them to the Stanley Cup Final here. But what a challenge for a homegrown drafted goaltender.
Yeah, this is a big deal. And if you believe in body language and demeanor, I love the way Stuart Skinner looked on media day and the way he handled everything. He looks like he's in the zone, if you believe in that stuff. But listen, he is one of the question marks. When I talk to other teams around the league, they still bring it up. They still want to see more before they totally buy in, and that's fine. On the other end, Sergei Bobrovsky, all he's done is, beat Andre Vasilevsky, Jeremy Swayman, and Igor Shesterkin on their way to the Stanley Cup Final. Ho-hum, no big deal there. So the Panthers have had excellent goaltending from Bobrovsky, who's a great story in himself, because a couple of years ago people were saying, what's Florida going to do with that contract, $10 million a year? Well, he's living up to it. I think Stuart Skinner, especially the experience in the Vancouver series, Ryan, getting pulled, coming back, winning that huge Game 7, I think he's ready for this moment. I may regret saying that, but I just think that he's gone through enough here this year. Remember, getting pulled a number of times in the playoffs last year against Vegas. I think there's some material that he's fought through here, some wounds, and I think it makes him ready for this stage.
We don't often hear a ton about a team's sports psychologist or a sports advisor, whatever you want to call them. We're hearing a lot about George Mumford right now. So George Mumford, back in the day, worked with Kobe Bryant, worked with a bunch of very famous athletes, and the Oilers brought him in this year. And he was kind of with the team through all the bumpy stretches. We're seeing him around the team a ton. He's been around through the playoffs here. The players speak quite openly about how much he has helped. And so the pressures of living and playing in Edmonton, the pressures of their own internal expectation being in a cup window, they've really leaned on this person, Pierre. I just find it interesting we're hearing so much about it right now, because we don't often hear a ton about that with teams.
No, and it's funny because as the game continues to have its evolution in the modern age, we talk a lot about analytics. We talk a lot about sports science. We don't talk about that side of it as much, and we probably should.
Yeah.
Because it's an important tool for players who are under duress, who have high-paying jobs and a lot of expectations, and not every day is rosy. And I think, frankly, if every team in the league doesn't have it, they certainly should.
There was a great shot when the Oilers beat the Dallas Stars. George Mumford was out on the ice with the team and gave Stuart Skinner a big hug, and you could see him say, "My man," he's right in there with this group. A couple of quick lineup notes, just confirming what the lines told us yesterday. Warren Foegele will be in the Oilers lineup tonight. You'll recall he was a healthy scratch at the end of that Dallas series, but they're bringing his speed, they're bringing his size in. He was a 20-goal scorer. That makes sense. And Philip Broberg looks like he's going to play a little bit of left and a little bit of right. Chris Knobloch said he'd probably see him on both sides.
I thought it was interesting, sorry to interrupt, Chris Knobloch saying, why make lineup changes after winning the Western Conference Final? Because we got outplayed in Game 6.
Yeah, exactly. There's no way they were looking at that tape going, roll that back out there. That was dominance by the Dallas Stars. But to your point earlier, they held on. They found a way to win a tight game. We expect these to be pretty tight games too. If the refs keep their whistles in their pockets, that's a big question mark, and we'll be watching that closely tonight. The Stanley Cup Final. Finally, Pierre, we'll have a game to talk about post-game. Look forward to it.
Yay.